بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء وخاتم النبيين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه ومن تبعهم بالإحسان إلى يوم الدين. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I'm your brother Abdul-Lateef from Arabic Virtual Academy as well as Abdul-Lateef.com. And I want to talk to you today about a principle that many of us have heard over the years over and over and over, and it's about time it starts to set in. And this is that principle that we've heard in a lot of our masajid and this different sittings, where we hear the people say over and over and over again, Al-ilm qabla al-qawli wal-amal. Al-ilm qabla al-qawli wal-amal. That knowledge precedes speech and action. Knowledge precedes speech and action. We hear this over and over and over again. But there's a problem. It's a major problem there. And I don't know how long any of you have been following our videos, but I do a lot of talk about rhetoric. And no, the statement is not rhetoric. Before the hecklers start coming along and saying I'm saying it's rhetoric. It's not rhetoric. But it becomes rhetoric when people are just spewing this statement out and it really doesn't carry a meaning. The meaning is not explained. The first thing we need to understand here is what is ilm. What is knowledge? We say that knowledge precedes speech and action. Because you heard someone say something in khutbah for Jumu'ah, does this become knowledge? Or is it something you heard? Or before you heard it on a YouTube video, or read it off of Facebook, or saw the little meme on Instagram? Was that knowledge, or is that knowledge? Once you heard that, or once you saw the meme, does that become knowledge, or is it something you saw or heard? Because we need to begin to differentiate between these things. Because if this isn't knowledge, if it's still he say, she say, even if it comes from a somewhat trustable source, and a lot of times when you look at it, a lot of times it's not trustworthy. Because you don't know who's translating who's made the translation. You don't know if they know who translated it. You don't, none of that. You just know someone said, okay, Sheikh Fulan said it. So we say, okay, well, look, he had to have said it. This is ilm. But we say that knowledge precedes speech and action. If that's not ilm, if it is in itself is not knowledge, then you shouldn't speak and act on that right away. Or even if you act on it. Actually, no, you shouldn't speak and act on it right away until it's something that's confirmed. Do you understand? A lot of times, people, they read something on Facebook, for example, and they run around telling everybody, okay, well, so-and-so said this, or the hukam or the ruling for this is this, or this fatwa, this is what you have to apply. And it's like, listen, is what you're telling these people this information, or this information that you're giving out, did you base it off of ilm? Because we say that knowledge precedes speech and action. You shouldn't have your speech and action unless you have knowledge on it. You understand? Does this mean, before some of the hecklers start with their comments, I'm not saying if you're getting something from a trustworthy source, then you don't act on it. If you're getting it from a trustworthy source, then yes, you trust them to know what they're talking about. Yes, you act on it. You may even be able to pass it off and say, okay, well, listen, so-and-so told me that this is what needs to be done, or this is what needs to be said, or this is how we go about doing this. But is Facebook really a trustworthy source? Because you saw so-and-so said that some sheikh said something, you know that that guy or that sister does not know Arabic. They don't know what that sheikh really said, let alone how to translate what the sheikh said. You don't know where they got that information from. So you're just spreading something that may itself just been spread. Is this knowledge that is supposed to precede our speech and our action? Or is this just us spreading more of what is just being spread that we ourselves don't know the validity of? Now this is the validity of, or just the basic issue on whether or not the statement has actually been made. Now let's sit down for a minute and think about its application. How we carry out this information. Is this ruling that was given? Let's say for sure we know that Sheikh Fulan said this. A bona fide scholar said this. Does this apply in all situations? Does it not apply in all situations? Sometimes we tell people things that may be an exception to the rule and we hurt them. Why? Because we want to be the first one to let everybody know, I heard this. We don't even know, this is not ilm. We're reading something and we don't even realize that we read into things. So we are now telling people this is what you need to do, and actually the opposite of what you're saying is what they needed to do. That statement might have actually been a fatwa dealing with a specific individual in a specific situation. It might have been an exception to the rule, and now you're running around telling everybody because you heard that some sheikh said this or was in some sheikh's book that this is what they need to be doing. It's a possibility that we could be calling people away from what really is the sunnah to a special situation that they shouldn't be applying anywhere, calling people away from the sunnah. So you see, we can't necessarily say because we've heard something or because we've seen it, it becomes knowledge. Knowledge is something, it's an understanding that you have about something, not just that you've seen it or that you've heard it. Do you have an understanding about what you're calling these people to? What you're calling them away from? Who you're calling them to or who you're calling them away from? Do we have knowledge about this stuff? Do we understand these things? Do we understand the issues that are revolving or wrapping around these situations? Or are we just talking? Because if we're just talking, where does this fit in with this statement that all of us say all of the time? Al-ilm qabla القول والعمل. Knowledge precedes speech and action. We blame everybody else for doing this or not sticking to this. They don't have knowledge of what they're talking about. They don't have knowledge of what they're talking about. They don't have no dalil for it. Okay, fine. Okay, and if we say that this is correct, and I'm not, all of you who know me know I'm not saying that this is always correct. But for the sake of argument, if we say that what we keep hearing people say is correct, then we're just as incorrect as they are. Because we're speaking out of turn. We don't really have knowledge about what we're talking about a lot of times. Why? Because we never really learned it. We can say, okay, I have knowledge about the fact that I actually saw this statement on Facebook or this statement on Instagram or whatever social media sites there are out there now. I have knowledge of the fact that I for sure saw this. But can you say that you have knowledge about that particular statement, about its application, about the fact that this individual actually said this? Because if you can't, then according to this qaida or this principle that we keep running off of our tongues like rhetoric, as I said earlier, the statement isn't necessarily rhetoric. But the way we use it is the same way we use a lot of the other rhetoric that we spew off of our tongues. Because if we don't have knowledge of what we're talking about, and we ourselves don't really have never really thought about what knowledge is, how do we know that that which we're speaking about or that which we are acting on is knowledge? How do we know that we're not just spewing something off of our tongues that may be detrimental to whole groups of people? How do we know that we're not just spreading lies, or even if it, like we said before, if it had actually been said, how do we know that what we understood was the intention of the person that said it? Or that we understand how, when, and why this thing is applied, and not just taking it as a general ruling on an issue. So if we really want to live by this qaida, or this principle, that knowledge precedes speech and action, then we need to have knowledge about what we say and what we do. Knowledge does not mean that we just have come across it, but it's an understanding that is had about what we say and we do. And this is what we need to check. Because if we're not doing this, then we're just as blameworthy as all of these other people that we've been blaming for all of these years of not having knowledge about what they say and do. May Allah Ta'ala aid us in correcting our situations. May Allah Ta'ala make us of those people who hear the truth and they follow it. And may Allah Ta'ala have mercy upon us in both this life and the hereafter. Ameen, ameen, Allahumma ameen. Subhanak Allahumma wa bihamdik. وأشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت وأستغفرك وأتوب إليك والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.